Thank you, Nikki. I mean, I feel so honored. This group seems so seasoned and experienced that I don't know what I could teach, but I'm definitely happy to share my experience with you. And well, at least I have the female perspective that will be different in this group. So should I share my screen? Is that how you want to do this, or do you have my presentation up?
Fun that you're mentioning this. I just spoke about my lame curation of being so weak with the ratio of men and women on speaking here. You're saving me.
Oh, nice. Sorry, I got muted. Do you have my presentation up, or should I share my screen, or do you see it?
Isn't that your screen? I can see your desktop here.
Can you? Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Now we can see the presentation, my entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, awesome.
Very good.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Layla. As Nikki mentioned, I'm an Armenian Iranian who, lived most of my life in California, but I've also lived and worked in 5 different countries. And I just moved, maybe temporarily, maybe not, for a year to Belgium. So now I am in Brussels. But still, my company is based in Silicon Valley and funded by a US government grant. So, I'm not supposed to be here. So yeah, let me, I start with my experience. Actually, since you guys are such seasoned businessmen, I'll go to something deeper to give you totally different perspective on me that might be more interesting. So I was actually an orphan in Iran, and my family had to flee Iran under very dramatic circumstances. So I came to America as a maid. I was illegal. I was cleaning houses and homeless at some point. But because I came to the country with $200 in my pocket, and this young, this kind woman who was from Singapore, who was an immigration lawyer, took pity on me, and she took me to her home, and so I was living with her and taking care of the house. And she really liked me and wanted me to be following her footsteps and be a lawyer. And so while working in her house, I applied for colleges, got a full scholarship. So really the American dream is true in my case. Got a full scholarship to a Quaker university and went to a Quaker school. And there I did an internship for her, and I realized law is not what I wanted to go into. I really wanted to go into education and be a teacher. So I got a full scholarship to be a teacher, and these things about America will amuse you, I'm sure. And I studied 4 years, 4 years to get a degree, but on my final year, they're like, oh, okay, after you finish, in order to be a teacher, you have to work for free as a student teacher for 1 year, and then you can be a teacher. Well, I didn't have that option because I didn't have parents. I didn't have any way to support myself if I student taught. So by force, I was like, well, I can't be a teacher then. And I said, you know what, one day I'll marry a rich guy, and when I don't have to worry about making money, then I'll be a teacher. So that's how I launched my career. I went on to open a restaurant because during college, I supported myself through waitressing, and that was actually a lot of money. You make a lot of money in the States. So back in the day, 20 years ago, I was making like $150 a day in North Carolina. So that's a lot of money when you think like rent was $300 a month, So with that money, I came out and launched my first, right after college, I launched the restaurant, and that became a really success for 2-3 years. I had moved to Atlanta at that point, and we created the Iranian restaurant in Atlanta, which was very interesting because in the South, people are sort of on the racist side. So there would be members of the KKK coming to the restaurant. And do you guys know who the KKK are?
Yeah.
Okay. So they would come into the restaurant, they would let me serve them, they would call me a sand nigger, and then they would keep coming back because they really liked the food. And that was the first time I realized, wow, food has this universal appeal that, even the most racist people, they hate, supposedly my race, but they can't refuse their stomachs. They're still gonna come and eat my food. So that was the first time I thought about this idea of food. And then I went to Mexico as a job opening some new divisions actually of Citibank in Mexico. And in Mexico, I volunteered for this project. Again, it was to help poor, like poverty-stricken communities in Mexico come out of their poverty through teaching them a business skill. So when I joined the organization, the guy in charge asked me, well, what business skills do you have? I was like, oh, I don't know. He said, are you good in finance? I said, no. Are you good in sales? No. Are you good in marketing? No. Well, what are you good at? I said, I'm good at cooking. He's like, oh, perfect. We have a tough time eating Mexican food because it's so spicy. Can you cook for the crew? And I said, sure. And so the Mexican ladies started coming to watch me cook, and I was teaching them actually French and English. And soon they started creating these food businesses, and that kind of like a little taco stand, but with a Middle Eastern twist, which was quite unique for the Mexicans. And so a lot of the women actually were able to come out of poverty and launching their own mini businesses using the theme of Middle Eastern food in Mexico. So that was my second kind of take on entrepreneurship, and once again appreciating the concept of food. So then I moved to France, worked a few years there, and came to Silicon Valley because in France I worked for LVMH, which is a company based on world's largest luxury goods. And I was every day dealing with people who were getting upset because they didn't get the latest Christian Dior glasses or whatever. And I thought there's got to be more to life than this. So I moved to Silicon Valley for a job for a museum. And there, the idea was to create a book where we would feature works of young women in their 20s and 30s to inspire other women to basically dream big, kind of what one of you guys said you're doing for young people now with your startup. So that was the idea of the museum and the book. And it was the year 2005. So I went to the director of the museum and I said, most women for whom we're publishing this book, they can't even afford to buy the book because it will be $25. So why don't we take this experience online and make it into kind of a virtual exhibit? So she liked that idea, but she was like, I have no idea how we would go about doing that. And I said, I don't either, but we'll figure it out. So I created an RFP and we put it out there, and a bunch of technical teams applied, and we built kind of an online community and we recruited celebrities, like the Queen of Jordan, famous writers, and we launched it. And we launched it on International Women's Day. So Google and Yahoo were really impressed by the project and they decided to feature us. And within 2 days, we had a million plus users. And then the United Nations invited us to go and exhibit it. So with that, it became, it became an instant success. We got the Anita Borg Institute Award. And I found my new kind of talent, which was community development or user acquisition in a way. So that became my new career, and I joined Hyperion Solution doing partnerships development for them. They got bought by Oracle. I went to eBay for international development, then moved on to Yahoo, and then I was kind of recruited by SAP. And when I was at SAP, it's kind of ironic because, SAP in Silicon Valley is seen as the least cool company you could work at, and I had the same time offer from Google or Twitter or all these, Uber, all these hot startups. But the reason I went to SAP is because they wanted to have an innovation hub where they did kind of innovation within the enterprise. And it was a secret project that they kind of rented the office separately from the headquarters, and they were they handpicked people from the group, and they're like, you guys are gonna go in here and you're gonna create products on 3-month cycles. And basically you don't follow a SAP procedure, do what you have to do, ask for forgiveness later, because otherwise, if you had to follow SAP guidelines, nothing innovative would have kind of come about in the speed that they wanted, which was 3 months for each product. So during that stage, I learned a lot about how to launch a product, how to take it to market. And different VCs started reaching out to me and saying if I could go and do the go-to-market plan for the people who were hitting them to do startups. So there's all these like kind of geeky young guys who, you know, who are brilliant coders or whatever. They want to launch a company. They go hit on the big VCs, but they have no idea how they're going to do operations or take the product to market, or they haven't done their proper, you know, even product market fit. So I became a volunteer kind of advisor for them. And until finally I was like, you know what, I should launch my own company. But also there's something that happened in between that. So basically, my daughter started attending school, and she went from a very affluent school to a very kind of poor school, because we went to Europe and we forgot to register her for our neighborhood school. So she ended up in the next school. So in the US, the schools are like assigned to your neighborhood, which automatically creates this inequality, right? If you live in a good neighborhood, you have like a top school. If you live in a not good neighborhood, you end up with a school that has like zero resources. So my daughter ended up at this school where all the basically immigrants' children went to school there, even though it was in Mountain View, California, which is where Google is, where, you know, you wouldn't think that about this school. But in that school, I realized my daughter was getting bullied because most of the kids get a free lunch plan from the government. So the US government gives you basically free lunch if you are below a certain income level. And that lunch is usually, you know, hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken nuggets, and unhealthy ingredients. So my daughter wanted the same thing, and I was like, okay, you can have those unhealthy foods, but let me first tell you how a hot dog is made. And then I will also tell you the story of these recipes that I've been cooking for you that come to me from, you know, my grandmother, other people that I've lived with, and then you make a decision. So once she heard the story, she said, you know what, I'm never touching a hot dog again. And she went to school and became an advocate for healthy eating. And then the teacher asked me if I could launch this program, and that's how my startup idea grew. And I had to ask SAP for permission if I could work on this side project. And SAP, after like 7 months, told me no, because just in case if they ever wanted to create an app that goes into cooking, then it would be a conflict of interest. And at that point, as you say, I guess on the topic, I had to reinvent myself again, give up a very comfortable salary. And, you know, SAP had some of the best perks as an employer. So I had to give that up to go into this field of education that nobody likes to invest in Silicon Valley. It's almost like saying the dirty word, you know, like, because basically there's not that many returns that in primary education. In secondary education, of course, you've had successes, but in primary education, there's not much success. And it's almost like, you know, cursing at an investor if you go and ask for money on that front. And these are some stats just to be aware. Even though 60% of all small business owners or entrepreneurs are 40 and over, there's also a huge, I feel like, sexism element in the Valley. I don't know if you feel it, Nikki, when you're there, but if you're 40, it's almost like you are a dinosaur. You might as well, you know, disappear your face, because it's really extreme. And I feel the difference, like here in Belgium, where people respect your age and your experience. There it's almost like, okay, if you're over 40, then then you're old-fashioned, your ideas are dumb. I kind of felt that. And then, you know, when I would go to talk to investors, they would tell me, they'd be like, why did you wait till you're so old to start this? You know, like, and I'll be like, oh, I'm old. So that's the first time I realized I was old. I was like, really, am I old? I thought I was still young. So that's one. So there's this dream of Silicon Valley and what it portrays. And I think for many young white men, it's true. But I think if you're a little bit older or you are a woman of color, the story is very different. And even for me, it was shocking because I'm from Iran, where the Islamic government, pretty much forbids women from doing anything. but at least there's a dishonesty about it, it's like, okay, you're a woman, you don't have the right to do all this. Whereas in Silicon Valley, I felt it was more kind of like, oh yeah, woman equality, blah blah, but I didn't really feel it. But regardless, I knocked many doors. I couldn't get investor money and I was gonna give up. But then my customers came to the rescue, and that's how I think you can have faith if you are on the right path or not, because all the investors told me, yeah, this idea is not gonna work. But the customers told me a complete different story. Like there was such a need for it that they started paying me from beginning. And that was the other funny thing. I would go to an investor and they'd be like, oh, I don't believe this idea is ever going to make money. So I would, pull in my books and be like, but it's been making money. We were profitable since day one. And this is with poor schools that we were serving that don't have budgets. And then they would look at it and be like, oh, well, this is never going to be whatever, 1 billion exit. So I was like, okay, I was thinking of giving up, but then my customers came to me and they came with a solution. They helped me to apply for a government grant. And so far we've had, $1 million in non-dilutive funds. So it isn't even better. At the time I was sad, okay, I can't get investment, but hey, I got free money instead. Plus the good side, being an education startup and getting money from someone like the National Science Foundation, it brings you a certain credibility that then opens the doors of the schools. So it actually makes sales much easier, because if you come in and say, I have a solution that teaches children science through cooking and it's funded by the National Science Foundation, there's pretty much no questions asked. So we found pre-sales fairly easy. We've been on pilot mode, and pilots all were profitable. Of course, the COVID hit created a situation for us. We have stopped making revenue since March. But so we are pivoting now to, we used to have like a SaaS model where it had services and software. So we are now forced to get rid of the service, which is something the schools really wanted. And we are going to pivot to selling this, the software only. So the software and curriculum, and to parents directly, or to teachers who will then assign that to the students to buy. So this new product will launch in 3 months. And I guess only time will tell how it goes. But thankfully, we got a follow-up grant to hold us through this year. So with that, I'd like to share some of the lessons I learned in this journey. And I'd love to hear at the end if your lessons have been similar or different, or, we should add anything to this. But lesson number 1 was, we kept thinking we have to be like the greatest invention. You have to come up with this really cool idea nobody has thought of. And yeah, our idea was pretty unique, but we found that was in a way our curse, right? Because when I would go to pitch, like every investor would listen and be like, so give me an analogy. Like tell me if you're Airbnb for this, you're Uber for that. And be like, no, we're really unique. Like this is the first, of course there's educational apps, but there's nobody doing what we're doing. And that was not necessarily making it easy, right? So you don't have to be a pioneer to succeed. You can just take an idea that's there and make it better. And that's a much easier path. That's what I learned. Oops. I'm a perfectionist, and I used to have all these long-term goals, like, and especially like when, you go to investors and they want to see a 10-year plan and a 5-year plan. And I found that even though it's good to have a 5-year plan, but somehow it would get really overwhelming. And so what I learned to do that really helped me was just break it down into 3-month plan, short term, and then have a weekly goal. So that really helped me and my team move faster, because when I would come in and be like, oh, in 5 years, we need to have this many schools, we need to do this, everybody would get nervous and stressed. And then I realized there's a lot of turnover anyway, people come and go. So it's good to mention like the long-term goal once, but then really break it down to what is our goal for these 3 months. And that was a huge help. Basically, As a startup, I learned that we constantly had to change direction and strategy. But actually, this was a lesson I had also learned at eBay or SAP or anywhere else where I worked in tech. Especially at eBay, it was pretty famous. Like, we would wake up, we would have all hands. The CEO would be like, "This is our strategy. Next month it's all going to be about the buyers. It's all going to be about, And then a week later, it was like, no, 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 scratch that. We're going to be all about the sellers." And people who had a hard time with change would not last in those environments. And with the startup, it's the same. Like with COVID, I know so many startups who died, and then so many startups who made a small pivot and now are thriving. Like the ones we thought were going to die are actually thriving. So for us, we made a big pivot, and we'll see how it goes. So taking care of yourself and your business. Of course, I used to work like crazy, well, I still do 12 to 18 hours, pretty normal. But now I really had to learn that I have to take care of myself, and then the productivity actually increases. So now I really have it in my routine, meditate, exercise, enjoy the time with kids, and like not stress that I have work, so I'm like, okay, this is my child's time. I'm just gonna give her my full attention. And then I realized, wow, it's almost like the God or universe or whatever it is, it helps you, because I'll be with my daughter and I'll be like, I'm not gonna worry about work, and we'll talk, and then she'll say something that will be like a kind of a solution for a problem I've been struggling with. So it's almost like more productive to take that time off. And then helping others, I really learned that, the more there is something called karma, that it really exists. Because every time like somebody asks me, can you be our advisor? Can you be, whatever, on advisory board? Can you do this? Can you do that? And every time I did it, at the end of the day, when I look back, it's like, wow, how much I benefited from that relationship more than probably they even benefited. So I highly suggest when somebody reaches out to you for help, to reciprocate. And then celebrating the little things. This one is really important. And this is a lesson I learned when I came to Europe last year. I spent 3 months in Switzerland. And I noticed, in Silicon Valley, one thing that everybody you meet, and Nikki, I don't know if you've had this experience, but it's like everybody you meet and their uncle has a startup, one startup here, one startup there. They have like 5 projects. And no matter how successful they are, everybody feels like they're a failure because they didn't become Mark Zuckerberg. You're not the founder of Uber. So it's almost this constant feeling of failure, and like nothing is good enough, And I honestly felt like that. I was like, oh, I'm a failure. I haven't become Mark Zuckerberg. And you almost lose sight of who you have become, how many people have you impacted, like what is your product doing for the world. So when I went to Switzerland, I participated in Mass Challenge Accelerator. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. And all the Europeans, first of all, it was pleasant to see they were 40 years old. So I was not like, this only person at 40. But the perspective I gained was, most of them were not there to be Mark Zuckerberg. They just, like, their biggest ambition was to have an idea to work for themselves or to change the world for the better. And then it reminded me what entrepreneurship is all about. And I was like, and then when I thought about it, and again, Nikki can relate, people who really do make it big in Silicon Valley, a lot of times their family life is actually shattered, their family falls apart. So the personal happiness is kind of destroyed. I'm not saying that if you're going to be Mark Zuckerberg, you're not going to have a good life, but the higher you go up, the lonelier it gets. And if your objective is just winning, and you lose sight of what else is important in that journey, then it becomes a very dangerous spot. And when I looked around, almost my neighbors, I lived right next to Google in a very, I guess one of the most expensive now zip codes. When I bought it, it wasn't like that. But but basically everybody I would talk to, they were such accomplished people, postdoc from Stanford, PhD from here, head of innovation at Facebook, head of innovation at Google, but they all seemed so miserable to me. And then when I came to Switzerland, it was just this really different vibe, which reminded me what entrepreneurship should be about, and that made me really happy, because then I realized to celebrate the little things, because I was like, wait a minute. When I came to America 20 years ago, did I ever imagine I could have my own company? I could make 10 other people, I have like 10 immigrant women be employed with a job that they absolutely love. So these are actually much more important. Well, these are very important things to celebrate. And so that has made a difference. This is not my graph. I found it somewhere, but early on my entrepreneurship journey, one of my mentors gave it to me. And he said, okay, if you want to become an entrepreneur, you're going to leave your comfortable job at SAP. Just keep this slide posted on your window, and remember, this is what your life is going to be like. And if you have the guts to do it, then go for it. Otherwise, don't become an entrepreneur to become rich or successful financially, because this is much more likely of how you will feel. And I can attest that it's totally my life. Though lately it's been much more on the, once I realized to celebrate the little moments, it's just much more going flat now. And one other thing that has helped me recently, I'm very hard on myself. So every time I would make a mistake, and for me, the mistakes were usually in people management. Like for me, entrepreneurship, the hardest part wasn't fundraising or coming up with the idea. It was team management, because I would get attached to the team. Then when you cannot compete with Facebook or Google to pay them the same salary, to give them free dry cleaning, all these things, and they come and they go, it was such an emotional, painful kind of separation for me. And then sometimes I give feedback, and especially with Generation Y, their skin is not as tough. I feel they cannot handle feedback like as well as our generation did. Like we were kind of used to getting feedback, our managers, but this generation, I feel like they get upset if I try to give feedback. So now what I do is just every day I write down, I'm like, okay, how did I fail today? And what's the part, like how did I learn from that, so that I'm not going to do that tomorrow? And that exercise really has helped me now with my team management. So that's pretty much my life in Silicon Valley.